This is a pretty intense Raw, right? A lot of things went down on the show tonight. We saw appearances from John Cena. We saw Nikki Bella return. We saw a title change in the main event. And we also saw the progression of the King and the Queen of the Ring tournament going down, right? Coming off of Money in the Bank weekend, there was a lot of buzz coming into this show, especially due to the fact that we have been promoting this main event match between Jey Uso and Gunther for several weeks now. So it really felt as if they're trying to make a big time effort into making this show a big deal. And I think they succeeded in every way with how the show went down tonight. What's going on, guys? It's Kevin Zwicker from Fast Count coming at you. And before I get into things, please remember to hit the like button and subscribe. Helps the channel out more ways than you even know, and it's free. Always remember that. But going into this show, right, I feel as if the buzz was all surrounding what was going to go down with R-Truth, right? This was something that was the talk of the wrestling world for the last couple of weeks once it came out that they weren't going to renew his contract. And I don't think that we were disappointed for what went down tonight, right? This was probably outside of maybe, and I would even go so far as to say this was probably his best WWE promo that he's had, right? Very reminiscent of his early TNA days where he was Ron Killings, and that's what he will be going by now going forward. And this was very, very entertaining. And it was one of those things where it felt as if, and this is probably what goes down with wrestling that I feel as if is the best elements of it, right? When you have that mixture of reality and storytelling where you're like, is this real? Is this not? When you're having that second guessing factor, and I feel like that's what went down, right? But we start off the show with an appearance from John Cena, right? Successfully getting his ass kicked by R-Truth in the main event of the Money in the Bank pay-per-view where him and Logan Paul took the L. I was fully expecting for us to get a confrontation between him and Logan Paul tonight, right? Because as we know, there was kind of a bit of a blow-up between those two during their match, but that's not what we got. And we had John Cena come out. This is his last appearance in Phoenix, Arizona, and you really start feeling that countdown of, geez, this thing is really going to end, and it's going to end quickly, right? When it was first announced that he was going to go do this farewell tour, it was always going to be between 40 and 35 dates. We are now shrunken down to, what was it? Was it 19 dates? Which is crazy, right? Only with 19 more appearances for John Cena during this last run. It's going by extremely quickly, man. It's like, damn, it's really going to be within the next handful of dates that we're not going to see John Cena anymore. And the fact that they're kind of wasting it on this shitty heel turn it kind of makes you sad, right? Because going into it, I think me included, everybody was excited to see this heel turn because it was something new, it was something fresh, it was something that we really haven't seen since he's become the Super Cena character. And the fact that it's kind of, fell flat for the most part, it's a bit disappointing, very reminiscent of, if you guys are NBA fans, kind of feels as if this is that famous meme that we always see all the time, a Shaq on the Celtics, but it's kind of in that ballpark of what it's feeling like, right? In wrestling terms. But John Cena comes out. He's getting this mixed reaction that he's gotten all throughout this heel turn. And he's basically telling the crowd, it's like, you guys teach me something new and every single time we're out here. And he says, truth is a lie, because it's getting these loud, we want truth, chants. And he goes on to talk about how, truth is like this gimmick. He is like this sideshow clown. And after a year from now, we're going to forget all about R-Truth because he is this flavor of the month. And he goes on to talk about how, counting down the dates that he has for this farewell tour. And he's like, you guys have thrown Cody Rhodes at me, Randy Orton at me. I want competition. I want the best. And as soon as you heard the word best, you knew that we were going to get CM Punk to come out here, right? This is one of those matches that everybody has kind of circled in their mind as to what they want to see during this John Cena heel turn. And we're finally getting it. But the way that it was announced where it's going to take place, you kind of heard like this collective sigh from the arena and from people online. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. But just due to the fact that we're going to get these two in the ring again. Just similar to the match that he had with Randy Orton at Backlash. Going into that match, I fully expected that we weren't going to get this 5-star classic, right? I don't think anybody was going into that match expecting that we were going to get Ospreay versus Omega. But this is kind of one of those nostalgic feels where you're just really kind of tugging at the heartstrings. And that match lost you guys for a second, right? Spectrum, right? You pay all these bills, on a monthly rate just for your internet to suck, right? But we're getting into the promo, the face-to-face between John Cena and CM Punk. And what's so interesting about this and what is going to go forward as to one of the realities of this heel turn is we're getting this matchup, which we've seen multiple different times, right? But there's a new layer and a new dynamic to this because of the fact that John Cena is the heel and CM Punk is the babyface. Usually we're used to seeing the roles reversed, right? So yeah, Punk come out and he's basically, looking like a disappointed stepdad when he's looking at John Cena. And he's going on to talk about how, I'm not fighting for, the establishment because John Cena, the establishment built him. He's like, I'm fighting for the people. I'm not fighting for TKO or the billionaires. He's like, unlike you who kisses the final boss's ass, which we haven't seen since, the Elimination Chamber, right? Well, whatever happened to that? But then he talks about, and this is what's so good about CM Punk when it comes to his promos with the callbacks. He called back his promo from AEW, if you didn't notice, which was a callback from his promo in ROH, where he talks about becoming the monster to fight the monsters. And he goes on and he's bringing up the fact that, John Cena kisses the final boss's ass while the people are CM Punk's boss. And then he goes on to compare himself to John Cena to the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox. As we all know, it's a famous rivalry in baseball. Fuck the Red Sox, go Yankees. And then John Cena goes on to hype this match. Best in the world versus the greatest of all time. Let's do this, but we're not going to do this tonight. You are going to have to follow me to Saudi Arabia, which, like I said earlier, right, was a collective sigh from the audience and a collective sigh from the internet, right? People are going to go on and talk about how CM Punk is a hypocrite, right, for wrestling this match in Saudi Arabia. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there's the infamous tweet where he tweeted at The Miz to go suck a Saudi money blood-covered dick. They kind of butchered that, but you know what I'm talking about, right? And now we're having CM Punk wrestle in Saudi Arabia. What I don't think people realize is once CM Punk returned to WWE, it wasn't a if he was going to wrestle in Saudi Arabia. It was a when he was going to wrestle in Saudi Arabia. So I don't see what's the point of having all this outrage, because yes, is CM Punk a hypocrite for going to Saudi Arabia? Yes, he is. The answer is obviously yes. But in professional wrestling, how many times have you seen, somebody, be a hypocrite, right? He was a hypocrite as soon as he re-signed with the WWE. So every time he shows that side, people get shocked. For me, it's like, what's the point of even acting shocked anymore? Because he was a hypocrite the moment that he re-signed with WWE. So I'm excited for the match. Not so excited that's happening in Saudi Arabia, because from the match qualities, you'll find every once in a while, it's like finding a needle in a haystack. You'll find a good match every once in a while with these Saudi shows, but for the most part, they kind of feel like glorified house shows. And would I personally enjoy the last time we see Punk and John Cena wrestle on American soil? Of course, because that would give me an opportunity to actually go see it. But hey, we're getting the match, right? Guys, remember to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't. I do a lot of shorts. If you guys, that's pretty sure if you guys have never seen my face, or the best chances if you guys have ever seen my face is probably from those, because I do a shit ton of them. And I do a lot of individual videos as well, right? But before this segment ends, we get a tease from Seth Rollins coming out, paying his tribute to Mr. Iguana with his green suit. He teases the cashing in of the Money in the Bank briefcase. You see John Cena and CM Punk standing in the ring looking like a bunch of idiots. And that's kind of the way that we end that segment. Next, we get to AJ Styles versus Chad Gable. And before I even say it to you guys, of course, these are two guys who hoop at an elite level. These are guys who can sleepwalk their way into having a pretty good match. And that's exactly what we got. This isn't the first time we've seen these guys lock horns in the ring. And it was a pretty good, solid showing between these two guys. We got to a point where the Creed brothers tried to interfere, but AJ Styles was able to overcome that. He hit the Styles Clash on Chad Gable for the 1, 2, 3. I don't know about you guys. And before they started putting advertisements and all that stuff in the ring, I kind of thought, it's not going to be that big of a deal, right? If you watch any UFC fight, the octagon is plastered with all these different advertisements. And the fighters, they come out with these different advertisements on their shorts, whether it's Monster or Red Bull or any of these other sponsorships. So I thought going into these shows that I wasn't going to care, right? But for some reason, right, it's become a little bit distracting. And I thought, when it first started, I was like, it's not going to be that big of a deal because I'm usually just focused on the actual wrestling, right? But for some reason, since Money in the Bank, right, when they put the Fireball sponsorship on the ladder, I thought this is getting a bit too much, right? And it's starting to become distracting because it's just like every time I look at the ring, you're trying to sell me something, whether it's Papa John's or what is it, American Beer or Prime or whatever. It's starting to get to the point where it's like, damn, dude. Every time I look at the ring, you're trying to sell me something. But after this match, we get to a segment where we see Liv Morgan, right, who's going to be in the Fatal 4-Way for the Queen of the Ring tournament qualifying matches. And she's confronted by Roxanne Perez. They're in the gorilla, about to go to the gorilla position because they're both involved in the Fatal 4-Way. And you see Roxanne come up to Liv, and she proposes to her, like, you know what, let's work together. Lives in the Judgment Day. Roxanne is trying to become a member of the Judgment Day, but you pretty much see Liv Morgan blow her off. And she says, I'm going to win this Fatal 4-Way. I'm going to win Queen of the Ring, and I'm going to win this title back from Io. And basically, good luck, right? So we're set up for the Fatal 4-Way. We got Liv Morgan, Roxanne Perez, Rhea Ripley, and Kairi Singh. And off the rip, people are trying to get Rhea about the paint. Because if you look, compared to these other three women, Rhea looks like Andre the Giant, because all these other women are pretty small, right? Especially Roxanne and Liv. When you saw them doing the double team action where they were taking on Rhea, you could just really tell how small these women are, right? But we see throughout this match that Liv and Roxanne, they have this teamwork aspect going on where they're really trying to get Rhea up out of there. There gets to a point where we see Kairi and Rhea go at it one-on-one, but for the most part, it was the Liv and Roxanne show. And going into this, once we started getting that tease of Liv trying to be on her own and not getting help from Roxanne, that kind of was a sign for me from the distance that we were going to see Roxanne win this match. That's exactly what we got. Roxanne, she wins with a roll-up. What it does is it teases more tension between the Judgment Day because it kind of feels like this is a group that's kind of fractured in different parts, where there's people who, like Dom, who's kind of caught in the middle, where it's like you would assume that his loyalty kind of lies with Liv, but at the same time, he's kind of, kind of feels like he's Switzerland, right? Very neutral. Finn is obviously trying to cozy up with Roxanne to drive this wedge between Liv and Dom. So it feels as if the group is kind of splintering a little bit, right? But Roxanne picks up the W, which is great for her. She is somebody who has been on the main roster not too long, so she's still trying to find her footing and really carve herself a good niche. The fact that she's able to pick up this big W, advance further into the Queen of the Ring tournament, is a good sign for her future. Personally, a big fan. I believe that Roxanne is very entertaining in what she does. And I enjoyed the Pop Rocks finish. Guys, please remember to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't. Hitting the like button costs you nothing, and it helps the channel out in more ways than you even know. Hitting the sub button if you aren't subbed helps the channel out as much as possible as well, too. But what do you guys think of the show? Is there parts of the show that you guys rocked with, especially the beginning part, right? I know that a lot of people fantasized about seeing Punk and Cena again, right? I know for a fact that if you would have asked me, less than 3 years ago, if we were ever going to see John Cena and CM Punk wrestle again, I would have said you're freaking nuts. But hey, the professional wrestling business is unlike any other business, and there's twists and turns in it in the weekly basis, right? We just saw R-Truth basically get his walking papers, and then we saw him get brought back, right? That kind of shows you the power of how unpredictable the wrestling business can be, right? Next, we get Becky Lynch come out here. As we all know, Becky Lynch becomes the Women's Intercontinental Champion after beating Lyra Valkyria at Money in the Bank. This was one of those things where you really think about it, right? This was probably the last accomplishment that needed to be checked off of the bucket list for Becky Lynch. She goes on to talk about that in her promo, right? She's the first women to win the main event of WrestleMania. She's a women's champion, both brands. She's won the Royal Rumble. She's done everything there is to do outside of winning the IC title. I guess eventually now she's going to have to win the US title as well to really just compete and become the Grand Slam champion, when it comes to the women's division. But she goes on to talk about how we had the stipulation between her and Lyra, right? If she was to win, she was supposed to have Lyra lift her hand in victory. And that's what went down. But went down the way that she was describing it was Lyra was very, very rough with the raising of the hand. It kind of felt as if she almost dislocated her arm. She asked Lyra politely, because she strapped the title around her waist because her arm was in so much pain. But if you guys remember, Lyra gave her a mean German suplex and gave her a case of the beats. Becky goes on to talk about how Lyra almost killed her. So she calls Lyra out. She says, I want you to apologize, and I want you to raise my arm right. Lyra's music hits. Lyra comes out with the crazy eyes. Before Lyra can do anything, we see a returning Bayley, right? Which I'm sure a lot of you guys were excited to see. Me as well. Bayley is one of the top targets of the Gooners, if you know what I mean, right? If you guys remember, prior to WrestleMania, Bayley was taken out. She was supposed to be the one that was going to be teaming up with Lyra for that tag team title match, but Becky later on admitted that she was the one to take out Bayley. So you knew sooner rather than later Bayley was going to return and get her get back. It really feels as if we're starting to get some matches set to where we were going to get the card for the Evolution pay-per-view becomes a little bit more clear, right? You're going to assume that with that pay-per-view, look at me, right? PLE. I'm still not accustomed to that name, right? You're assuming that they're going to want to stack the deck for that PLE, right? When you load up the card with all the women. You already saw later in the night what went down between Liv and Nikki Bella, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. So you're assuming they're going to have a mixture of some of the ladies that are on the current main roster, of course, a couple ladies on the NXT roster, maybe throw in some of the TNA talent and bring some of the legends. I fully expect one way or the other, we're going to possibly get Trish Stratus on that card or Lita. Just with the way that the cookie's going to crumble, it all depends on how things go down, right? So after we see this segment where Bayley is giving Becky Lynch the beats, where we see Becky Lynch run into the crowd, we see a hoodied up masked man run out of crowd, jump on the announcer desk. It is revealed that it is R-Truth, similar to the attire he wore in the main event of Money in the Bank, right? So everybody's going ape shit crazy. The whole crowd is into it. R-Truth is getting this hero's welcome, right? And then he goes on, and you can tell that the guy is emotional, right? You can see his eyes kind of welling. You can see a little bit of the lip quivering. This is a guy who I think a lot of people took for granted, right? Due to the fact of the role that he played. He was obviously this comedic character for so long, and he's done such a good job at that role that people kind of only, kind of pigeonholed him into that role, right? Kind of like an actor, right? I know there's certain actors where it's like you see this guy and you only see them do action, right? And that's the only thing they can do. Or you only see this person do comedies and that's all they can do. But there's more to certain people, right? So R-Truth is saying, don't tell nobody that you don't matter. Don't let anybody tell you that, they don't hear you. And he goes on to talk about how the truth is back. And he starts speaking about, R-Truth like in third person, right? He's like, you guys love R-Truth. I love R-Truth. But sometimes, R-Truth can be too funny. R-Truth can be too nice. R-Truth can be too forgiving. And then he does something that, as a guy with long hair and braids, I can relate to how insane this is. He takes a pair of scissors, and I sat there and I was like, oh no, he's not going to do what I think he's going to do. And he cuts his hair. All of his trademark dreads are gone. R-Truth is going to rock the baldy for the most part. And when I say the baldy, I don't know if he's going to be rocking a low fade. I don't know if he's going to go full on Steve Austin, but their dreads are no more. And he's basically introducing himself as like, there's no more R-Truth. It's just Ron Killings. Ron Killings is taking over. If you guys are hip hop fans, I don't know if you guys are familiar with YNW Melly, right? YNW Melly is a guy who's currently incarcerated for potentially, allegedly, unaliving his best friends, right? And he goes on, and in some of his music, he talks about how there's a difference between Melly and Melvin, right? Melvin's his real name. He's like, sometimes, when Melvin takes over, things can get kind of iffy, right? And that's kind of what it felt like tonight, right? This No More Truth, Ron's in the driver's seat, and it looks as if we're going to get a little bit of that R-Truth, that Ron Killings from his early TNA days where he was the NWA champion. That's the first time where I was exposed to R-Truth. I remember going to a taping of SmackDown in the mid-2000s. And this is when the WWE version, the shitty version of ECW was still around. And R-Truth came out for a dark match for right before the ECW taping. I remember seeing it. I said, oh, man. I said, that's Ron Killings from TNA. I said, this guy's going to be awesome. And then later down the line, when I saw, him just be this comedic character, because in TNA, he was never really this comedic character. He was always the guy who was taken serious. So I was just like, man, this is a guy who could really go. And I know R-Truth's best in-ring days are probably behind him. He's in his 50s, even though he doesn't look like he's in his 50s. But it's interesting to see, finally, we're going to get to a point where we're going to see a different side of R-Truth in the WWE. Next, we get to a segment where we're back in the clubhouse with the Judgment Day. Obviously, Liv Morgan is going to be furious after losing that match. You see Roxanne come in. Liv comes in here, with a ball of fire. And we see Finn Balor. He's speaking with Dominic Mysterio. Dominic Mysterio is about to be in the Fatal 4-Way to qualify for the men's, King of the Ring tournament. And Roxanne is there. And then we see Liv confront her. And then you see Roxanne tell Liv, like, basically that I tried to help you. I didn't let Kyrie pick up the pin on you. And then you see Liv basically tell her you're right and congratulate her, right? And that's the end of the segment. We see Finn Balor with a shit-eating grin, knowing that his plan is going as planned. Next, we get into the men's Fatal 4-Way with Dom, Penta, Braun Breaker, and Sami Zayn, right? This whole match was basically a 20-minute or 15-minute showcase of how great Braun Breaker is, right? Now, ever since joining up this group with Seth Rollins, Braun Breaker has been extremely protected. He's been pretty much protected his whole run because I feel as if, and I've talked about this before, AEW used to always talk about the pillars, right? The 4 pillars of basically who was going to be up next. And I've considered Braun Breaker and Gunther basically 2 of the 4 pillars in the WWE once the main event scene clears out from all the older guys like Punk, Cena, Roman Reigns once he's gone. I feel like these are really going to be the 2 guys who are going to carry the company for the next, 7 to 8 years, right? And we're showcased that from the get-go. Braun Breaker came out, looked like a badass. It was very apparent that they wanted to show this guy off and make him look as good as possible, right? But the match started off with Penta taking out Dom. Obviously, Dom has all this beef with all these different luchadors. If you watch the Worlds Collide PLE this weekend and the Money in the Bank PLE this weekend, Dom and luchadors don't mix well, right? So we're seeing Penta and Dom go at it. Obviously, Braun and Sami Zayn, they have this past due to them battling for the Intercontinental Championship the last several months prior to Braun Breaker joining up this group. But where things get interesting is we get to a point where Braun Breaker is dominating like he did pretty much the whole match. And we get a surprise appearance from LA Knight. Yeah. And he sits there and he decks Braun Breaker, leading to where Sami Zayn was able to pick up the W and advances his tournament. For me, I think, we're seeing this story, right? And we saw it play out after this where Sami Zayn was confronted by Karrion Kross again about becoming a champion. Where I'm thinking that this is going to lead is we're going to get a finals and the King of the Ring tournament between Cody Rhodes and Sami Zayn. I think that's where we're going to go. I feel like the fact that they keeps telling this story about Sami Zayn not being able to win a championship and he is determined to win a championship, I think that's going to lead to him being in the finals. And obviously he's going to get a big reaction in Saudi Arabia due to the fact that he is also of the Muslim faith. And Saudi Arabia, as we all know, is a Muslim country. I think that that's what they're going to do, right? And he's going to go one-on-one against Cody Rhodes because, as we all know, Cody Rhodes is QB1. So him losing before he gets to the finals, I don't think that's happening whatsoever. And I think that we're trying to figure out a way where we're going to get back to Cena versus Rhodes too, because I think that for John Cena's last match, it's kind of up in the air, right? And I think that's what we're going to get. I think the finals of this tournament is going to end up being Rhodes versus Sami Zayn. That's just my gut feeling now. Of course, I reserve the right to change my mind later on. But if I had to go guns to my head right now at this moment, that's where I'm going. That's the direction that I'm going with it, right? Okay. Next, we get the Brie Bella return. Not Brie Bella, Nikki Bella, right? Same thing, right? We get the Nikki Bella return. They're in her hometown of Phoenix, Arizona. She's also, obviously in the WWE Hall of Fame. So this was going to get a big reaction no matter what. And we have Nikki Bella come out, get a big reaction in her hometown. She's basically coming out telling the people how she missed the fans. She missed the Bella Army. She was happy to be there. She's interrupted by Liv Morgan. And it gets to a point where Liv, she's like, Nikki, you're jealous of me. I have respect. I have a title. And I have a man, which is a low blow, because as we all know what's going on with Nikki's personal life. If you don't know, just hit the Googles. And then Nikki hits back with, you say you got a man, but your man might not even really be yours, basically, right? Because we all know Dominic is wrapped up in this triangle, which this is the luckiest guy on the roster, right? He's always wrapped up in these triangles with these attractive women. First Rhea, then Liv, and now Roxy. What did this guy do to get so freaking lucky, right? It's got to be the hair, right? That's what it is. It's got to be the hair. And then you see Liv basically make a comeback. And she says, you're always just going to be this reality TV diva. Nikki comes back to try to attack Liv, but she gets hit with Oblivion. Obviously, I feel as if that's setting up for a match at Evolution 2. If you guys don't remember, Nikki Bella main evented the first Evolution. She went one-on-one with Ronda Rousey, which I'm all sure that you guys remember as being an in-ring classic comparable to Steamboat versus Savage. Right? Then we get to the main event. Jey Uso versus Gunther. This is a match they have been hyping up for several weeks. This is probably the most hyped up title match for in recent memory when it comes to Raw, right? Because it's been mapped out for so long. And watching this match, the vibe that I felt was a classic Hogan match, right? If you guys remember, the formula for Hulk Hogan's matches pretty much that was like 90% of his career was Hulk Hogan gets a beating for about 10 minutes, hulks up, makes his comeback, does his couple of moves, and picks up the W, right? And this match was very much so going through that formula. The thing about Hogan and Jey is the fact that Jey has maybe a couple of more different moves because Jey, as we all know, nobody's ever going to mistake him for Bret Hart in that ring, right? And this is going to kind of sound like a wrestling snob take, but it's my take and it's my channel, so I can say whatever I want, right? I low-key, as a fan, get offended where you have Gunther, who is this guy who obviously is an elite hooper in that ring, right? The guy can go with anybody. I'm not going to compare him to Flair or Michaels, but he has the same ability of he can have a good, pretty good to solid match with just about anybody, right? The fact that you have Gunther having to sell for Jey Uso, who, like I said, nobody's going to mistake him for Bret Hart in that ring, is low-key offensive, right? But Jey does what's the most important thing in this business, right? Making money. That's what the whole wrestling business is about, making money, selling merch, getting people to come to the arena to see you, getting loud reactions. So there's multiple ways to skin this cat, right? But you see Gunther pretty much manhandling Jey for the first 10 minutes. You see Jey Uso trying to make this comeback, and it's going to the point where Jey is throwing all he can at Gunther. They're exchanging different holds. The headlock, the sleeper hold, that's the move that Jey Uso made Gunther tap out to at WrestleMania. You see both of them exchange different opportunities where they both hit each other with the sleeper hold. Jey is throwing everything he can at Gunther. Eventually, we get to this point where Jey gets locked into the sleeper hold. He doesn't tap out, but he's passed out, and we see Gunther win the world title again. Gunther is a two-time world champion. Now, for me, as soon as I saw Jey Uso's son walk into the ring, that's when I knew that Jey Uso was going to lose. Like anytime, it must just be like this thing in my head that was just installed by Vince McMahon when it comes to like if anybody's wrestling a match in their hometown, they're going to lose. That's always my first instinct. Or if anybody's bringing like their family, I automatically assume that they're going to lose. And when I saw Jey walk to the ring with his son, I automatically knew that he was going to take an L, right? Now, this kind of leaves Jey Uso in a funky spot. We have one last mystery spot open for the men's King of the Ring. What they could possibly do is have Jey Uso be that guy. I don't think it's going to be Bill Goldberg. People have been possibly throwing around the name of Mr. Iguana as that guy because we all know Mr. Iguana is the freaking man, right? The guy, he was the biggest winner. And you guys could check out the video I did about it earlier about how he was the biggest winner of Money in the Bank weekend, right? That guy made himself a whole bunch of freaking money this weekend, and good for him, right? But it's leaving Jey Uso in a funky spot. Gunther is the champion again. It's the rumor has it, and it's always kind of lingering, the fact that we could get Bill Goldberg wrestling that match against Gunther for the title in Saudi Arabia, which I don't know if you guys have been keeping up with what Bill has been saying, right? He's been talking about how he's training and he's getting ready for this match, But he's saying things like, man, my shoulder, I haven't really been able to lift things up properly with my shoulder for the past 5 years. He's talking about his really beat up, right, coming into this training camp for this match. And it's just like, my God, when you hear these things, it's like, that's freaking scary, because Goldberg 100% isn't that freaking great. So imagine a Goldberg coming into this match that's like 75 or 65%. That has to be freaking scary. I thought that the match that scares me the most, obviously, is that fiasco that went down with him and The Undertaker. But as far as I know, outside of the fact that he concussed it himself, muscle-wise, all of those things, he was good. Neurologically, he was screwed up. But I don't think that I'd be safe. He could possibly drop Gunther on his head. He dropped The Undertaker on his head. And that was what? That match was what, 4 or 5 years ago? Probably, maybe even more now. Time is going by really freaking fast. So it's just like, it's kind of like the body's telling you, hey, buddy, you might not want to do this. But the directions that we could possibly go with Jay is far more interesting to me, because I prefer the unknown. And I think the fact that we have SummerSlam coming up soon, I think that obviously you probably want your biggest merch seller to have a predominant spot on the show. But things are going to be interesting. I think he's going to be the guy who's going to be in the King of the Ring match. I think that what he's going to want to do is he's going to try to want to work his way back up, possibly get a rematch with Gunther. But like I said earlier, I think the direction is going to be Sammy and Cody. I feel good about those picks. You guys think I'm wrong? Who are your picks? The women's one's a far more interesting one to me, because that one's a little bit more unpredictable. I would expect, and they what I didn't like, did you guys notice that Asuka's coming back, right? He's coming back next week. They spoiled it. They should have just had it like her as the mystery opponent for the women's. I thought that would have been a lot more cool, but I guess they want to hype up the fact that she's coming back, which is good to see Asuka, right? It's been over a year since she's been around. But that's pretty much it, guys. It was a very good show. One of the better Raws in the past several weeks. SmackDown and Raw for me have kind of been lacking. I personally enjoyed NXT and Dynamite better for the past couple of weeks. I'll be back for the Dynamite post show. I think what I'm going to do is, because it's going to be another four-hour block, I think I'm just going to go live immediately following Dynamite. And if something happens that's worth talking about on Collision, we'll just talk about it then. Because I can't see myself going live at midnight and talking for another hour or half hour. But guys, man, please remember to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't. Hitting the like button helps the channel out a lot. Subscribing also helps the channel out a lot if you're willing to do it. If you haven't, it's free. Always remember that it's free. It doesn't cost you anything to hit 2 buttons, guys. But guys, I am Kevin Zwicker. I'm out.